Happy 2026! A little belatedly, but I wanted to get some actual reading done in the first reading challenge video of 2026. So even though I'm filming this on January 2nd, you probably won't see it till the end of the month. This year, I'm doing a challenge called Shop My Shelves because I have a shameful secret. Here is the burden I've been carrying with me that I have not wanted to tell anyone about. When I moved out of my parents' house to go to college, almost a decade ago now, I took only books that were sentimental to me and books that I had not read. We had a huge collection of books. Most of them were mine. And there are some books that I've carried with me through dozens of moves that despite moving out again nearly a decade ago, I still have not read. And I keep buying books and they keep getting added to my TBR, and I've run out of room on my shelves. I've run out of room. We live in a small apartment and it's time to declutter. A while ago, I got a Kindle, maybe 2-3 years ago. I know better now. I will get out of the Amazon ecosystem one day, okay? But I did that because I had moved so many times with so many books and I did not have the upper body strength or the shelf space to keep moving with all of these books. It certainly did reduce the amount of physical books I was purchasing. However, I really do just prefer a physical book, and my partner started reading last year. He went from being a person who reads 2 books a year to a person who reads well over 100, almost as many as I did, and I read 139 books in 2025. He also likes physical books, and we're both like, well, if we're both going to read a book, we might as well get a beautiful physical copy for our shelves. But there are books on these shelves that definitely no longer serve a purpose to me. I won't reread. And there are books that I know can just go. We're going to do a book destash. So here is the challenge. And here are the actual rules. In 2026, I am on a book buying ban. I cannot purchase myself new physical books. I have to read all the books on my shelves that I have not read yet instead. This year, I am only trying to get through fiction. All of my fiction lives here on these shelves. They are not sorted by genre, and fiction by far takes up the most space in my library. So this doesn't apply to plays or nonfiction or even manga. While I'm trying to get through the entirety of my fiction library, it is not my 2026 goal to go through my other genres and declutter them this year. However, kind of an addendum to this rule is that if I want to read a play or a graphic novel, I need to try and do it from my shelf. I shouldn't purchase a new one. I'm not trying to get through all of them, but I shouldn't purchase new ones either because, again, book buying ban. The purpose of the challenge is to declutter the fiction situation. Books I have pre-ordered last year to arrive this year do not count. They don't count as new books I'm purchasing myself, but they do get added to the list and I do have to complete them in 2026. However, I am not allowed to pre-order any new books for this year. If they're going to arrive in 2027, that is okay, but they cannot, as a pre-order, arrive in 2026. I think I've maybe only pre-ordered graphic novels and mangas for 2026. Maybe there's one. I think the special edition of the 3rd book in the Legends and Latte series maybe comes in October. But we'll deal with that when it happens, okay? Books other people give me have the same rules as the pre-order from last year. They do not count as books I've bought for myself. However, they will just go at the end of the list and I will have to get through the physical edition in 2026. So here's how it's going to work. All of my fiction books are arranged mostly on this shelf with no regard to genre, just by the last name of the author. We are going to look at every book on the shelf, and as we encounter it, we are going to decide to keep, declutter, or read it. When I read it, I then have to decide if we are going to keep or declutter it. Again, with the end goal of making some space on my shelves for the books that I have read but can't get on here because there's not enough room, and maybe even creating some space for some new books. As we go through this, I am also going to be logging the books that are going to be staying. If anyone knows a good system for that, let me know. Otherwise, it's going to go in an Excel sheet. Or maybe, what does Google call it? Sheets? Probably a sheet. Because I do think I should start sorting things by genre, but I don't know how many books of each genre I have, so I'm not really sure how specific I need to get to sort it out. We'll deal with that at the end. That being said, the goal is to get through half a shelf every month because essentially there are 6 shelves on here, and if I can get through half a shelf, we'll do it in a year, right? Theoretically, that's enough of me talking. Let's dig in. The first shelf is actually the top of the bookshelf. It's not really a shelf. I'm going to need to get on the stool for this. Okay, listen, I know you've seen better angles in your time on YouTube, but we got to work with what we got. Let's dig in. Wow, I can see I'm going to be recovering some bookmarks, so that's good news. Right off the bat, we have Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and what is this? Oh, Life, the Universe, and Everything is in the Hitchhiker's Guide. This book includes all 5 or 6 Hitchhiker stories, and it has some of my annotations in it. So I don't need Life, the Universe, and Everything as its own book. This is much more compact and easier to bring around, but I think we can just have the compendium here. So already off to a good start. We're destashing 1. It's so hard for me to get rid of books, but we will destash this. Next up is the Limetown novelization. I believe this is a prequel to the podcast Limetown. I bought this because I loved the podcast when it was airing, but I never got around to reading it. And the farther I got away from having listened to the podcast, the less excited I was to read this because truly, I just kind of forgot what happened. There was a time where I would listen to hundreds of audio dramas a year, thousands of hours of podcasts, no joke. But I don't work at a job where I can just listen to podcasts like that anymore, so I consume way less. So I want to read this. This will be my first read, and then I can decide if we're going to destash it. Let's pull it off the shelves. Also, if anyone has good tips for getting stickers off of book covers without damaging them, let me know. I thrifted most of my books, honestly, that weren't gifts, and I would love to get the annoying stickers off. Next up is The Astonishing Life of Octavian Nothing, which I loved when I read originally, and I have read it and reread it a couple times since then, but I think that if I want to read historical fiction about what people of color have been through, I would like for that to have been written by a person of color. I think this book is good for someone else's library, but it is not a thing I would pick up again, so I'm going to destash it. This is just Asimov science fiction. There's some good stories in here. I would love to reread it, but not the point right now. I know I want to keep it. I bought this for $2.50 a couple years ago, which is less than the cover price when it was published in January of 1999. Be sure to get your X-Files figures, kids. Next is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. This was a gift. It was a good book. The Handmaid's Tale must be living in storage somewhere. I will be keeping this. Next up, Legends and Lattes and Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. This is not a 5-star book. This is a 10-star book for me. We are hoping to get the special editions of these. I pre-ordered the special edition of Brigands and Bread Knives, like I said earlier, and we will give these to some of our friends when we purchase those, but for now, they get to stay. The Last Unicorn is also a favorite novel of mine. This is my annotated copy, I believe. I grew up on the movie, if you know, you know. But this will definitely not be going anywhere. This is very sentimental to me. And I'm gonna call this halfway, okay? I know it's not quite, but I have my reasons. Next up is a book we have to read. I thrifted this. It's H2O by Virginia Bergen. I think I got it for $1. It sounded interesting enough to pick up, and then I just never got around to reading it. So add it to the to read pile. Next up, we have 2 Ray Bradbury novels. This is Something Wicked This Way Comes, and this is The October Country. Absolute classic. We gotta keep Ray Bradbury. I have read and reread these. I know my partner likes Ray Bradbury as well, so these are not going anywhere. Next up is this beautiful illustrated edition of Wuthering Heights, published in 1943. I picked this up at a library book sale. Look how beautiful this book plate is. It's a sticker that's so cool. I don't want to take that off. So this will most definitely not be going anywhere. I imagine it had a dust jacket that got lost somewhere at some point. So that is where we're going to start. I have 2 books to read, and then I will check back in with you. Wish me luck. I did it. It's the end of January and I did it. And I want to say something I don't think I said earlier, which is that audiobooks don't count. Audiobooks don't count. If you're friends with me on Storygraph and you see me logging lots and lots of audiobooks, I'm going to be listening to a lot of audiobooks this year because I am on a book buying ban, but that's buying. And I can still support my libraries this way because audiobooks take up a separate space in my life than reading physical or even digital books would. If I could sit and read something, I wouldn't also be listening to something. Well, actually I would. I call it bookmaxing. Sometimes I'll like read a play and I'll also be listening to a novel, like an audiobook at the same time. It drives people nuts. But I don't want to talk about it. In addition to these 2 books, which came off the shelf, I also read a volume of Free Rent I already owned, a couple of plays I already owned, a bunch of audiobooks I may or may not list here if I remember. Oh, the cats are fighting. And I read 2 physical books that were in my house that were not on this shelf. One was House Moving Castle. We can't talk about where that came from. We have to address that in a later video. But this is the other one. Rabbits was on my partner's TBR and he was carrying it around. And while I was reading podcast books, I was like, let's just read Rabbits too. So let's talk about it. This book pissed me off. Oh, it pissed me off. It was like a good book on its own with a compelling story. But unfortunately, having listened to the podcast made it worse, which is really unacceptable because it is required for you to have read this book to understand the end of the podcast. That was infuriating. It doesn't seem like a lot of people, at least not a lot of people I interact with, have read this book. So I would kind of love to keep it for that sake. But like, as far as if I think about keeping this on my shelf versus being able to purchase a different book, the choice is easy. This one has to go. So reading that, thinking of podcasts that piss me off made me think that, I should read Rabbits. My partner picked this up having never heard of any Pacific Northwest Stories podcast except for that I would not shut up about the ending of the Black Tapes, which happened before we started dating. I'm just never not talking about what happened. I feel like Rabbits was the only Pacific Northwest Stories podcast that had a compelling premise, stayed gripping all the way through, and then did not fucking blow the ending. So I was nervous to read this book because I'm like, how are they gonna fuck it up? Like, we didn't need more of that. Like, you stuck it on Rabbits. This was the good one. I listened to every Pacific Northwest Stories podcast, and this was the one that I was like, good job, you finally figured it out. And it was like good, it was fine. I think having listened to the podcast makes this book a lot richer, and it didn't necessarily like go in the direction I wanted it to go. It kind of became obvious where it was going at a certain point, and it like wasn't what I was wishing for it, but it wasn't bad. Like, it was fine. I'm excited for my partner to read this, who has no idea about the podcast, and see what he thinks. I think this will probably stay on our shelves for at least a little while until we decide to do the next Destash. And then next is H2O, and I really do want to show you the cover design. Like, you must understand, I thrifted this for probably $2 or $3 if I had to guess. And look, it's so compelling. You must understand why I picked this up. But I did not enjoy the experience of reading this. It is listed as young adult fiction, but it's on the very young side of young adult fiction. I would definitely say it read more like middle grades. I have read and enjoyed quite a few middle grades books. We'll run into them on the shelf here, but just the voice that this main character had, combined with the fact that this was a like very hopeless, everything is bad pandemic book, was difficult for me. Having lived through a pandemic, I have a really hard time reading pandemic books that are like new to me that I had not already read, especially if they were written before 2020, except The Fireman. 5 out of 5 book. Love it. But it was just like everything was bad and hopeless all the time. And I totally could see where the narrator was coming from. They were very annoying. They were a very annoying, like, teen or preteen girl. And in these awful, awful circumstances. And I could see how maybe that, like, juxtaposition would be funny. But it just felt so sad and hopeless to me. I don't know. I'm not, like, really articulating my opinion of this book correctly, but all of that is to say, despite the really fun dynamic cover design, this cannot stay on my shelf. We need to make room for something else. That leaves our Destash total at 4 books, and I am feeling pretty good about that. I'm definitely gonna have some more reading to do in February. I had already read a lot of these books. The other half of the shelf contains a lot more books I haven't already read. And then I think we're gonna have to wait till March to address my dark secret, unfortunately. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope you keep me accountable to do and post all 12 months of it, because I will do it. It's gonna be the content side of it that's hard. I don't know how to end a YouTube video.